everyone, Gaijin Goombah here. So almost 2 years ago to the day, I put out a video talking about a Koei Tecmo game called Toukiden on the Game Theorist channel. It's got a weird name, but truth be told, it's one of my favorite franchises of all time. Not just because I think it looks and plays well, I mean, geez, fighting giant Oni and demons has never felt more satisfying than this. But it does an amazing job at encapsulating so many things about traditional Japan, which I love to absolute death. There's too much to name here, but I highly suggest you go see it for yourself. It is to this day my favorite of all the videos I have ever made. But now we have a second entry into the series, Toukiden 2, and thanks to Koei Tecmo who gave me a copy, I started tearing through it looking for anything I can analyze. Now, as far as the game itself goes, if you ever wanted to play Monster Hunter but with less tedium, more action, and an open world, you'd probably love this game. But I discovered something else that just blew my freaking mind. Like I said before, Toukiden has a lot of Japaneseisms, and Toukiden 2 is absolutely no exception. There's talk of real-life Japanese holidays like Setsubun, ritualistic practices like Misogi, and you even get to partner up with the spirits of tons of Japan's historical heroes. But there is one big overarching theme within the story of the game that I just really gotta talk about. The division between the outsiders and the insiders. In-game, insiders are referred to the people who lived within various villages before what was called the Awakening, basically when all of the giant demons came out of nowhere and almost wiped out humanity. While the outsiders are those who simply lived outside the established villages but basically came in as refugees. Now each village has a shrine maiden who's responsible for the maintenance of a giant protective barrier that keeps the demons out and the people safe. Only there's just one catch. Only insiders are allowed to live within the protective barrier, while outsiders lack any real protection against demon attacks. Yeah, you could probably guess how well that goes in-game. Tensions between insiders and outsiders become so great that even with peace right around the corner between the two, there is still discontent which boils over into pure violence. Without any other context, this seems like a fairly basic story, right? A sheltered group of people allowing in a group of unknowns into their society with a lot of insiders mistrusting and even begrudging those outsiders? But it's the terminology that's used to describe these groups of people that really gets on me. Insiders and outsiders. See, Japan has this really interesting phrase, ware ware Nihonjin, or basically, we are Japanese. While in some cases it's used to accent national pride, in a lot of other cases, it's a phrase that categorizes Japan's worldview on who they are and who everyone else is. As in, there are Japanese and there are non-Japanese. That's kinda it. They are those on the inside. In contrast, Japan refers to foreign people as literally outside country person, or gaikokujin. But more times than I would like, they're referred to as Gaijin, or literally outside person. Yeah, that's where I get my name from. And ooh, trust me, it makes sense. Because Gaijin doesn't refer to just anyone from outside of Japan. It actually is more of a racial term. Now check this out. Ask anyone you know from Japan if they would use the term Gaijin to describe any other Asian. I promise you with 100% certainty that they would say no. From Korea to China to Mongolia to the Philippines, none of them would be considered Gaijin. But if you're from the Americas, either North or South, if you're European, if you're African, literally anywhere else in the world, you earn yourself that Gaijin stamp. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it means you're gonna be denied service at shops and restaurants from time to time. A lot of folk in Japan will automatically be under the assumption that you know nothing about its culture, language, or unspoken rules, but the worst case scenario is that people will label you, openly, publicly, without any repercussions, based on your race. Oh yeah, you better believe this happened to me. I'm sitting in the third-year teacher's room back when I taught overseas in Japan, and I had this ditzy student come up to me and ask why all foreigners drank cola all the time. I was about to explain that while it's popular where I'm from, we drink other stuff too, but no! The math teacher who sat to my left cut me off and told the student, oh yeah, he drinks that stuff all the time, that's why he's fat. Okay, that's pretty much the Japanese equivalent of saying all black people like fried chicken and watermelon on top of categorizing the entire race as being overweight. It was astonishingly rude, insensitive, and utterly mind-blowing considering the fact that he said it in front of the vice principal, and he didn't get reprimanded at all. So yeah, there's definitely some discontent between outside folk like myself and the inside, aka Japan. Of course, it could be worse. If you're Gaijin and you disturb the peace in any sort of legal way, you can expect deportation to be the last thing to worry about. I've heard some pretty nasty stories about hours of unceasing, unrelated interrogation as well as a lot of psychological pressure to admit to a crime. Seriously, if it came down to a legal matter between you as a foreigner and someone who was native born in Japan, your chances are pretty slim. Going back to Toukiden 2, while all members of both the Insiders and the Outsiders are, for the most part, Asian looking, I can't help but feel that this story's plot doesn't have some connection to this long-running issue of Gaijin and Nihonjin. It's like the barrier holds this kind of symbolism. Those who are inside are safe and protected, while those outside have to play nice if they want to stick around, but aren't really extended any protection. Now, before anyone feels the need to flood the comments with anti-Japanese rhetoric, 1, I want to express very loudly that this sort of attitude is not true for every living soul in that country. In my time living abroad, I met plenty of wonderfully, beautifully spirited people who I cherish to this day. Even at work, many of the other teachers who were not English teachers were some of the sweetest people I met. And Hutch and Tomo, they are family to me, and I would do absolutely anything for them. And 2, if you consider what foreign powers have put Japan through in the last couple hundred years, I can't exactly blame them for being skeptical. And this is where the insider-outsider conflict in Toukiden 2 really resonated with me. When tension starts to boil during the story of this game, the people start talking about the wrongs the outsiders did against the insiders. Outsiders who became bandits, terrorized those who lived in the villages, backstabbing, raiding, maiming. It's pretty obvious that the outsiders weren't exactly the best neighbors. And yeah, guys, history has shown that those outside of Japan haven't exactly been all that nice to them. As far back as 1854, American Admiral Matthew Perry came a-knocking on Japan's door, not asking, but demanding trade relations. See, prior to this, Japan actually closed its borders to the rest of the world for over 200 years under a policy known as Sakoku, or closed country. And it wasn't just foreigners that couldn't come in, but Japanese couldn't go out. That is, unless they were okay with being executed when they came home. Yeah, not exactly the smartest thing that the Tokugawa shogunate did during their centuries of rule. Anywho, instead of asking nicely and explaining to the shogunate that trade relations with the blooming and booming United States would greatly help the economy of Japan, Perry had 8 heavily armed warships sitting just outside the docks of Edo Bay and said he wasn't going to go anywhere until the treaty was signed. In March of that same year, Japan under force gave in to almost all of Perry's demands. As such, was recorded the first Gaijin smash in history, but it wasn't going to be the last. The outside force of other countries have continued to poke and prod Japan into changing economic and social policies to modern day. Just last year, the UN began to put serious pressure on Japan to ban the display of sexual violence against fictional women in comic and games, to which the Japanese Women's Institute of Contemporary Media Culture responded in saying that 1, trying to create rights for fictional characters is meaningless and doesn't actually help anyone in the real world, and 2, the manga and games that were under attack are fields that women themselves were a part of and helped pioneer. And even just this year, there was that BBC documentary Young Sex for Sale in Japan, and oh boy was that a train wreck. I just want to go on record in saying that I don't think much research went into both sides of the debate. It felt more like a selective bad-mouthing more than it did addressing the more broad cultural concepts like cute culture and new culture. More on that in future videos. Basically, I'm simply making the point that it's not like we as foreigners have always played nice with Japan. There have been far more than one occasion where we try to push our own cultural agenda on them without considering their own. But does that mean that everything is hopeless? Absolutely not. Just like in Toukiden 2, where the insiders and outsiders were finally able to resolve their differences and negative histories with each other, I think we as humans have the resolve and capacity to understand one another. I mean, heck, if you look at any of the recent events I just mentioned, you'll find plenty of non-Japanese who are more than willing to look at Japan's way of thinking, and vice versa. I definitely believe that we have the ability for not only Japan and the outside world, but all peoples of the world to come together in understanding of what makes us different and how those differences don't have to be what divides us. I think we as humans have the ability to live under the same shield of understanding and compassion, but we gotta take the initiative and stop arguing our own ethnocentrisms and really start listening to each other. But what do you guys think? Can we break this vicious cycle of insiders versus outsiders? Let me know in the comments below, and hey, before I go, I gotta announce that I'm going to be visiting a lot of cons this summer. Retropalooza Houston on April 22nd and 23rd, possibly Anime North on May 26th through the 28th, still working the details out on that one. Too Many Games June 23rd through the 25th, Indie PopCon July 7th through the 9th, and Con Bravo July 28th through the 30th. I hope I get to meet a bunch of you guys out there. But thanks for watching, everyone, and a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you're wanting even more culture in gaming and anime, check out those annotations on screen and links in the description to learn how nerd culture can teach you about the giant world that we live in. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on all of my newest cultural videos. But until next time everyone, this is Gaijin Goombah, signing out.